All right, we're officially live for another Wise Talk Mastermind Saturday afternoon-ish stream. Excited to have, for the most part, the whole team back in action. Looking forward to just getting thoughts on where we're at, where we're heading in this state of emergency. So how's everybody doing this afternoon?
I'm doing fine. It's exciting times. You never know what you're going to hear or see when you turn on the news.
Very true, very true. Trader Steph, Carrie Lutz.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. We'll just have to see where this takes us this time.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Hunker down in the bunker in New Hampshire.
All right, so the title of this live stream is "What's Next During a State of Emergency?" And I'm really curious to get a legal perspective. And so, Mr. Kerry Lutz, having a legal background, can you shine a little light as to some of the when you heard the state of emergency announcement, what came to your mind, and what do you think is currently what's coming, based upon what you know?
Well, I think that the reaction to the virus is far worse than the virus itself. I think the way people are behaving, runs on toilet paper is pretty insane. But once there's a state of emergency, how much further behind can martial law be? I was fortunate. My son managed to get out of Ireland before they shut it down. And even though he's an American and they have to let him back in the country, if there's no planes flying here, that's really difficult. So he got back last night, and he had some medical stuff he wanted to take care of here in the country, and we're visiting some relatives and stuff for the holidays, so all worked out. But I guess everything they're doing is in the law there, and let's see how far it goes.
Yeah, one of the things that has me really upset, disturbed, however I want to label it, is how reactive the government is as opposed to being proactive, which they've never been proactive. But all this stuff that's happening now should have been done months ago when they knew there was something happening in that region of the world. But all of a sudden now, cutting down air travel, talking about just testing. They're talking about just getting people tested, like with nothing else on top of it. So my thing is like, what good is that at this point? Like, what type of leadership is that to me? But that's just my opinion. So anybody else want to chime in on their thoughts of the state of emergency thus far?
I like to throw one thing out along with what was just said, and that regarding martial law, I got to put the glasses on because I can't read. There is a mayor in Champaign, Illinois, and she has declared, this is according Restoring Liberty, an article there, she has declared a citywide emergency over the Wuhan virus and has done this on executive order. This shutdown, I'll call it, or reaction to the citywide emergency would allow her to order a general curfew around the city, closing, this may bother some people, and order the closing of all retail liquor stores, including taverns and private clubs, or wherever they sell intoxicating liquor and beer. Order the discontinuance of the sale of alcoholic liquor by any wholesaler or retailer. You can't, and I'll paraphrase it, you can't buy gasoline unless you're putting it into a motor vehicle that has a gas tank attached to it. And then finally, Ben, you're going to love this. Order the discontinuance of selling, distributing, dispensing, or giving away of explosive or explosive agents, firearms or ammunition, or any character whatsoever. Then there could be the restriction or rationing, the issuing of quotas regarding fixing of prices, sale and distribution of food. It goes on and on. The point is could martial law happen? This kind of sounds like some mayor going totally whack and is going to do this not because the city council or whatever regional, state, local government, just on an executive order. Executive orders sound to me a whole lot like tyranny.
Yeah, that woman, she can kiss my ass.
Wait a minute. Why would you allow her to do that? That sounds too personal.
Well, she might not want to. If I lived, now I'm not that far away. I live in St. Louis. I know exactly where her town is. If that was our mayor, oh no.
So what do you think? So from that city there, so what do you think the response will be by the public? Will they, out of concern or scare, will they say, okay, let's dial back? Or is that like, on some, hold on a second, that's a little bit too much now. You're infringing upon my rights now. So now let me act out now. What do you think? Will I help it all or no? And will more of that be coming in the weeks ahead from other cities?
I'm afraid that somebody else might take this as, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And it's like, to Carrie's point earlier, the overreaction is worse than what's really going on. I mean, yeah, do common sense things. Learn how to properly wash your hands. Keep your hands off your face. Be careful what you touch in public, on and on and on. But as last thing, as one commentator said today, where was all the screaming and yelling with, what was it, the swine flu during Obama's administration? 12,000 people died.
Yeah.
Nobody was screaming. So yeah, we got to pay attention. And to me, an executive order is not law.
Yeah.
It might be a want, but it's not law.
Yeah. George, you haven't welcome to the discussion, my friend. How you doing down in Medellin?
Sorry, man. I keep forgetting about daylight savings time. We don't do it down here. That's why I'm wearing a hat and everything. But yeah.
It's all good. But no, we were just talking about a city declaring an executive order of basically restricting everybody's rights in the sense of in the form of some type of martial law order. And we're talking about if that type of thing spreads, what type of problems we might face, given the fact that everybody's up in arms about the state of emergency. So one thing that troubles me is that listening to the task force that's been put in place by the president, I'm listening to the doctor give his recommendations on what they're doing, and everything is reactive to what's currently going on right now. But the two primary takeaways I wrote down is to practice safe hygiene and isolate yourself. And I'm thinking, like, from the medical field, shouldn't you be able to give us a little bit something more of like some things that people can do, practical steps like, drink more water, abuse your immune system, things that people can actually do other than just sit in your house and just go get tested to find out if you have it or not. Like, you get tested, then what? Like, we just wait it out, ride it out. Like,
that's all you can do, Mike. That's all you can do, because in fact, the only reason that you want to self-isolate or do those things is just to keep the hospital system from being overwhelmed. It's going to work its way through the population, even if you isolate and get the R0 value down to where it's close to the flu. It's still going to affect almost as many people. It's just that exponential growth curve to where it overwhelms the hospital system is what you're trying to avoid. Because once you get to that level, I hear a lot of people on podcasts and in the media talk about the death rate. They get very hyper focused on the death rate, that it really only is bad for people, let's say, over 60 years old. That may be true, but it's totally irrelevant, because what you have to look at is the rate at which it spreads. And then you have to look at the serious complication rate. And then you have to ask yourself, how many hospital beds do we have in the United States? We've got 900,000, of which 600,000 are usually occupied. So you got 300,000 beds. Let's say it's just as bad as the flu, where we get 20 million cases like we did with the flu last year. Keep in mind, it's far more infectious than the flu. Well, even at a 10% serious complication, which is what you're seeing, that's 2 million hospital beds. We've got 300,000. So even if it just does, even if it is life-threatening exclusively for elderly people, not to minimize that, you've got the hospital beds that are completely occupied. Then what happens if you get in a car wreck? What happens if you need surgery? What happens if you have to have a cancer treatment? And all of the capacity for the hospital system is completely full. That means that person that got into a car wreck, which would be bad, who would be able to be saved easily, is now going to potentially die because of the hospital issue. That's the real problem. I think that's what most people miss.
So basically, they're saying, if you're going to die, you're going to die at home. And just give us a ring when you're dead or when one of your friends are dead, and we'll actually pick up the body. There's no reason like drive to the hospital, then die. You know, I wonder, maybe they can work out a deal with Uber where the Uber driver, if you got someone dead at your place, you call up Uber and they'll swing over and grab it, him or her, whatever, and they'll run you over to the local hole in the ground and chuck you in the ground.
Well, that's if the hospital system fills up completely, that's what you're talking about. But then you're assuming that Uber is going to be in business, and with the junk bond market blowing up, I don't know if that's
who's going to be willing to drive? Who's going to be driving in an environment like that to go pick up some bodies? Like, that's another issue there. But
Hey,
Trader Steph,
I'll tell you what, capitalism fixes everything.
Trader Steph, you more the death rate. Give us some insights as to what you've come across and some things like that. Shine some light on this for us.
Yeah, we'd love to. It's going to take a little longer after I hear what everyone said. It's going to take a few minutes longer than I anticipated just to straighten a few things out. But look, I just want to say I'm not biased to this with regards to the data. I'm going to give you the closest facts that we have so far. And you can't trust China's data. Definitely not. But I'm not going to use China's data. But I've got a personal beef with this virus because a superbug killed my dad. It wasn't his arteriosclerosis, and it wasn't getting his legs hacked off. Once he got infected with MRSA at Johns Hopkins, that was it. That took away his chance of full recovery. And from the 1918 pandemic, my grandmother was orphaned because her mother died in childbirth, and then her father and that child died from the flu. God, I might not be here today. So this is a lot worse than most of what I'm hearing, and not necessarily from you guys. People really don't get it. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information to just kind of consider. And let me get this screen share going.
Yeah.
To make sure I pick the right one. Yeah, I think that's how you do it. Let me know if you see it.
Yes.
I think it's coming on now.
It's on.
Okay. So that's how it got here. I love this graphic. I'm sorry I can't, I don't know where it came from. I picked it up on Google. It didn't have a credit back to it. So I apologize to, if you're out there, kudos to you. Great graphic. It's not stoppable. A little piece of information that came up in the last couple of days. The December 1st patient in Wuhan before the wet market is probably not the case. Now they're traced all the way back to mid-November. So forget all the conspiracies, man. I'm just sick of hearing it. Someone could have spread it to the wet market, and the wet market just created a cluster that got all the attention. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. But let's go quickly look at these numbers. And the only numbers we have to go by, Johns Hopkins is actually the best database because they're pulling in everything from everywhere else. But just because the data is coming in from somewhere doesn't mean it's correct. So that's why I'm going to kind of somewhat ignore the China data, but not completely. So let's just throw a few facts out there. You have the case fatality rate. Now, what's important about the case fatality rate is you don't use the total confirmed.
Mhm.
That's the column there on the left. You completely ignore it. It's irrelevant because people who are confirmed doesn't necessarily mean they're in a hospital. There's a wide grayscale of how it affects a person. Lots of variables here. You focus on those two right side columns. You've got total deaths and you have total recovered. Total recovered could be anything from you seek medical attention, didn't get admitted, to being admitted, and then a gray area of severity all the way up to being incubated. Incubated is ICU. The total number of beds that are available in the United States, that's irrelevant. The number you want to look at is that there are 100,000 ICU units. We can make beds. We can put beds in gymnasiums. You know, we can do that.
Right.
But ICU units, we've only got 100,000, which includes the equipment for them. And 70% of those are filled right now because of various reasons, surgery, things going on, influenza, etc. So 30,000 beds that have the ability for incubation is a drop in a bucket. And that's where the problem lies, which is the problem they're having in Italy right now. So with those kinds of things in mind, look at that total deaths and the total recovered. And I've already did the math, so I don't have to take you all through it. But if we look at the big picture, if we take all the data that they have so far, the CFR rate as of this morning worldwide is 7.36%. All right. If we take China, just for the sake of looking at it, they're down to 4.63. South Korea is they're about halfway through. They're at 12.37. Italy is in the immediate throes. You know, they're about 2 to 3 weeks in this at most. They're at 42.29%. The USA is at 80.95%. So the variable, that whole wide range, is because at some point it's going to come down to a median. Now, how you do the math, you add the total deaths to the total recovered. You put that number to the side because a death is a recovered, but they separate them on the list. So you add those two together, and then you take the total deaths and you divide the big number into whatever the total deaths are, and that gives you your percentage. Not total confirmed cases, irrelevant. So how does that compare to other things, which is the big question? So let's look at the 1918 pandemic, and then I'll talk about influenza. In the 1918 flu, it's estimated, because record keeping was not digital, you know, we did the best we could, right? 10 to 20% was the CFR rate when everything was said and done. So roughly 1/3 of the world population got infected. So that CFR rate turned out to be around 3 to 6% of the entire population died. 3 to 6% of everybody died. Now the numbers of how many range from 40 million to 100 million, depending on where you go and get the numbers from. So it was worse than the Black Death. So what's that got to do with, let's say, influenza? Well, here's the last chart I'm going to put up for you. It was a screenshot from a CNBC piece about 3 weeks ago, actually. And what it shows very clearly is the R0. How many people can you infect? The seasonal flu is only 1.28.
Right.
COVID is anywhere between 4 and 7 at this point. So you're infecting a lot more people. This thing is much more virulent. And the seasonal flu only kills fewer than 1%. And depending on what numbers you look at, if you look at the National Institute of Health, they're talking about numbers of 0.1%. It actually kills. So this is a brand new virus in a completely naive population. Everyone is infectable. There's no cure. There's no vaccine. The R0 is really extremely high. The only thing that even comes close to it is measles. And the CFR rate has a potential of being 10 to 20% when all is said and done. So when you look at Italy, I like the Italy numbers because it's the first Western nation that has a very modern medical system, and it's a mess. And we have that potential to happen here. And I wouldn't say we're overreacting to this. What I would say, I think too many people underreact and weren't prepared for even something as simple as a hurricane or a blizzard.
Yeah.
So now we get the overreaction, right? Everyone's got to do something because they weren't doing nothing to begin with. That's my 2 cents.
Hey,
Well,
Steph, are you taking just the straight numbers when you look at the CFR? Or are you trying to somehow quantify how that would increase due to the lack of capacity in the hospital system, to your earlier point?
Well, that's interesting because, yeah, when you have to start making decisions about who you're going to take care of because you don't have enough equipment,
Right.
you know, the 35-year-old that has no health issues versus the 95-year-old that's, you know, I wouldn't want them on the front line. So there are a lot of variables that could increase the CFR rate.
I gotta take issue with your numbers here. First of all, most of the fatalities have come from vulnerable segments of the population. Okay, you're looking at people with respiratory issues, diabetes, but not just regular type 2 controllable. Talking people that really wind up in the hospital because of their diabetes. All right, we're talking about people with compromised immune systems. When you look at the people who died in China, most of them were 65 and over males who were smokers. And if you ever been to China, they smoke the way we used to smoke here 60 years ago. In addition, most people who get this are asymptomatic or have mild symptoms, mild cold-like symptoms, cough, whatever. So the actual infection rate is probably many, many times what is being reported here, because most people aren't even going to bother to get tested because whatever symptoms they have, either they don't have any or they go away very quickly.
That's exactly why the CFR rate is based
well
on the total recovered versus the total deaths. You don't include the total confirmed infected or even who aren't infected. That's an irrelevant.
No, it's not irrelevant because most people are not going to fall within that point where they need medical treatment or at least need to be treated in the hospital. Okay, most of them aren't. The other thing that they don't know yet, but which appears possible, is that this thing is going to subside as the weather gets warmer. When you look at the map, especially in the United States, you see that the largest outbreaks have taken place in colder climates, in New York, in Washington State, in California, but Northern California, where temperatures are still pretty cool, and there's a sweet spot for this virus that's somewhere in the 41 degree range, 41 degree Fahrenheit range. So, I mean, I talked with a guy who is the head of the National Cancer Institute. He's a professor of epidemiology at Yale, and also was a board member of the National Institute of Health. So it's all going to hinge on the virus's susceptibility to warmer temperatures and increased sunlight. So, but the people who need to be protected are the ones who are most vulnerable. What we're doing now, trying to contain it, really haven't focused on the people most likely to get it and get it badly. And those people, you know, we know who they are. They're elderly people in nursing homes. We saw like 20-something people die in Washington State in nursing homes. The other thing is, all right, as far as confirmed cases, according to the people who are panicking, it should be doubling or more every single day. Now, granted, testing has been spotty in some areas, but we're up to 2,300. 4 days ago, we just hit 1,000. So it's not quite spreading the way that at least from those numbers that we know. We don't really know hospital admissions related to it yet. We're not sure of that because all of the cases are kind of being reported the same way as just confirmed. So the fact is, the amount, according to Fauci, and the guy I talked to was Fauci was his student and worked for him at NIH. He says the normal mortality on the flu virus is 0.1%.
Exactly.
It appears right now for the for this thing, for the Wuhan virus, it may be 0.7. But
we got to look at the R naught, Kerry.
What's that?
Yeah.
You got to look at the R naught. So it goes back. Even let's just say that it's the same death rate as the flu. That's fine. Even if it had the same complication rate, if you take the R naught value at 1.28 and then you look at an R naught value of 4.6, it still wipes out your hospital system. And then, although even if it does affect only the elderly from a serious standpoint, it's going to affect the young people, the infants, everyone that can't get the hospital attention that they need due to the capacity being at 200%. It's all about that R naught value. The death rate really is almost inconsequential.
Well, like I said, it's all going to hinge on what happens in April.
So
All right.
Well, it's
All
not.
about what
I
happens
want
in
just
April.
want to respond to Carrie's real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a thing about the virus that they survive better at certain temperatures. That's a given. That's not an arguable point. But the reason that it's spreading in the style that it is because of where it started and when, and then the international travel and the geographics involved with that. And there's a lot of, I can get into a lot of things here, like this genome sequences and where the first patient was in the United States, as far as we know it right now. But we got infection rates that are beginning to explode in South America. That's going to happen. So warm weather is not necessarily something that's going to tamper it down, but ultraviolet light does kill it on surfaces. Historically, when you have a pandemic and you have waves, you're going to have 3 waves. Whether we're in the first or second wave here globally is brought into question now because they identified an earlier patient from mid-November over in China. This could be the second wave. But if it's not, and we're only in the first wave, there's a very high probability that we will have the second wave with a secondary mutation in the fall, which will be the worst one. And then it'll, taper off next spring with the third wave. But when all is said and done, a lot of people are going to die. And that's the bottom line. You need to be prepared and take common sense precautions.
So watch it. When this thing runs its full course in this country here, I'm assuming those second, third waves will also be occurring in China. If their first wave is coming towards its end and is sweeping through Europe, what does it look like for the current? There's 320 million, Americans right now. After phase 3 or whatever happens in 2 or 3 seasons or 2 seasons, what are we looking at as far as it like no elderly or? What's the total number of the population in a guesstimate if it runs a course the way you guys are describing it?
It'll taper down next spring because by that time we'll have a vaccine and the human population will start building antibodies.
Yeah.
And it'll become a seasonal thing where it won't be so severe, but it's now with us permanently.
Okay, so if this is a bioweapon, I would assume that all that was taken into consideration when it was created. And so will this vaccine that's coming, it's going to come from the pharmaceutical realm, will this be something to just patch over or solve or resolve or kill?
Here's the problem with the bioweapon theory. Let's just cut to the chase.
Go ahead.
When you build a bioweapon, you build it with an antidote. You do not release a virus that has the ability to mutate and go beyond your antidote. That's basic virology. And any military person that works in biowarfare will tell you that. But here's the problem. That doesn't mean that there wasn't something accidentally released. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily a bioweapon that was intentionally released. You can't eliminate that possibility. But to outright say this was built and designed specifically to wipe us out and all that stuff, you're forgetting that basic premise of what a bioweapon is and how it's designed.
Now, will the antidote that is definitely created along with that bioweapon, is it something that the public will receive? Because if they create it with an intention, they also, whoever they are, whatever it is, they're going to make sure they're good. But after it accomplishes what they wanted to achieve, will they then give it to the public, the rest of those that have survived?
Well, here's the problem. You're assuming that Mother Nature has a time clock and that we're able to outsmart it. That's why they're designed with an antidote to have a certain level ratio. You know, you don't have a bioweapon that you want it to kill you too in your country. They're designed for a very specific purpose. That's what bioweapons do. But hey, look, not all humans are smart. They could be pretty stupid, but something can get out there and mutate and get beyond what you can control it. That's common knowledge that you don't do that. So if it's released with that ability, that meant they want to kill everybody, not just a particular portion of the population. So connect those dots.
Good point. Now, along with that, we have a financial meltdown. This past week was historical on Monday and historical yesterday, according to the president, who took ownership of yesterday's rally upward. And so should we expect a lot more of this upcoming Monday? And is that 1.5 just pennies in a bucket or what?
Well, two things with the 1.5. I don't know if you can hear me, Mike, but
yeah, I can. Go ahead.
Two things with the 1.5. Number one, that it was very undersubscribed. I don't know that most people realize that. If you look at the New York Fed's data, you'll see that they committed, let's say, to 1.5. The first 500 that they issued that afternoon, I think only had a demand of, and I don't want to say only, but it was somewhere around maybe 50, 60 billion. The next morning it was 17 billion, something like that. So it's more so, I think, something that the Fed did just to provide that level of confidence to the market that they'd be the backstop for liquidity. But also one other thing that I don't know most people realize, they're committing to doing that every week. That's not just last week. That's every single week, but not for the next, I don't know how long their time frame is, but it was between $1 trillion and 1.5 trillion that they're committing to for, like, let's say the next 6 weeks. It wasn't just last week.
So that's good to say their balance sheet is going to be pretty heavy by summertime.
Well, if the banks took them up on it, and there's a lot of collateral issues there, and I don't think they can for regulatory reasons, but at least from the people that I've spoken to, that's their take on it. But assuming that they were that everyone took them up on their offer, the balance sheet would be, oh my gosh, you're looking at a $20 trillion balance sheet within just a couple months.
Hey, Michael, this is Alan. I was on mute, so I wanted to ask one more question before we get into the financial, back to the medical biology.
Yes, sir.
And this is to Carrie and Steph and George, because you all mentioned this, and about the number of hospital beds, and what I'm missing in a way is, okay, I've had the flu a few times in my life. I didn't require going to a hospital, and I'm not dismissing or minimizing what happens with this particular disease. My question is more, what does this disease, the Wuhan virus, does it get so bad that it causes people to need hospitalization? And kind of what basic care are they getting in the hospital? I mean, what ailment, what problem, what need is being treated, and approximately how long, if that can be estimated. Yeah. Because it's just kind of a blank in my mind as to why there is such a need for hospitalization. Not because it doesn't exist, it's because I don't understand it. Thanks.
The serious complication rate, from what I've seen, it sounds like Steph would know this better than I do, but is around 10%. With the flu, it's maybe 1%. So what that serious complication rate means is you need a hospital. And out of those 10%, not all of them are in just dire need of life support, but let's call it 1% are, and to where you're not going to live unless you're hooked up to a machine. That's the bottom line. So that's why there's that strain. But Steph, I'm sure you know a lot more about it than I do, or Carrie, maybe.
Anybody? Maybe not. They're probably Paul.
We have really are China's numbers, and we've seen that the thing has peaked also in Korea, evidently.
Yeah, and Singapore. And Singapore, they've really taken extreme measures, and they've done very well. The problem is they did it right away. Like, as an example, here in Colombia, we only have 16 confirmed cases so far, and they have shut down everything. I mean, they're closing schools on Monday. Last week, in the middle of the week, when we only had like 6 cases, they banned all public gatherings of over 500 people. That includes church and soccer games, which doesn't sound like a big deal for Americans, but trust me, in South America, that is huge. That's their life here. So they're taking all of these, draconian measures when they only have a very small, just a couple people with the virus. The problem with the United States is we kept hearing, oh, it's just the flu, it's just the flu, it's just the flu, it's just the flu. So since it's got what's called a 14-day latency period, and it can spread asymptomatically, it's been spreading in the United States this entire time. And that's why you get the exponential growth curve that you get in like an Italy or an Iran compared to something like Singapore, where they take it a much more aggressive approach right at the beginning because of what's been seen elsewhere. I think Colombia is going to be fortunate in the sense that, to your point, Carrie, it's in a warm climate, and also they had the hindsight of seeing what the response has been in places like Singapore compared to places like Italy, where it hasn't been so good. So
yeah, viruses mutate.
Yeah,
ain't much we can do about it. And there's only one thing: you have to break the cycle of the virus itself, and that's through spreading it and mutating through multiple hosts. And then you can see the sequences, how they've changed. So it's the only option we really have is to break the cycle the best that we can.
I think the good news from a mathematics standpoint is if you can get that R0 value down to 1 or less, a virus will self-extinguish. So that's really the key. If Americans are taking this, or it doesn't matter, any group of people are taking this seriously enough to where they're self-quarantining or doing whatever they need to do, social distancing, washing your hands, doing all the things we're talking about. And if they can get that R0 value from 4 or 6, whatever it is, all the way down to 1, then we're good to go. We're going to have problems, but it's not going to get out of hand. So hopefully that's what will happen.
Well,
we're going to get through this.
This guy, the guy from the NHI, it's all about April, because if the spread doesn't go, totally parabolic by April, and it turns out to, subside due to warm weather, then he said by next year they'll have the vaccine. They've already got it. They're testing it now. They're not talking about it, of course, but if that's the case, then by next fall, when it's going to come out again, the vaccine might very well be available. I mean, that's not a definite, but there's a good possibility.
Now, that first batch of that vaccine, is that something that, unless you're like in dire straits infected, do you get it? Or if you're not infected and been doing a good job of quarantining yourself and not at risk right now, showing no signs, do you go out and get it? Like, that's the concern to me.
I think
wouldn't take it.
Batch would go to the people who are most vulnerable. Okay, that would make the most sense, because that's going to cut down on your fatality rate dramatically if those 20-30 million people are immunized.
Yeah, and the need for hospital beds. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
I have a question.
Racing time.
We've yes, we have a virus. Yes, it is spreading. Yes, to everything that everyone has said. Probably what I'm worried about most is the supply chain of all of the existing medications.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That are 96% made over in China, and China basically announcing that we aren't shipping you crap. And that worries me more than any virus, because we have people who are only alive because of a regiment of medication that they get every day that may run out very quickly. And I don't think we have really I don't think we have an answer yet on how we're going to deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ben.
Right. I think after the initial virus has its way through the population and we have issues from that, then the next wave would definitely be the lack of medication to take care of people with just their ordinary illnesses and diabetes and all those things like that. Could be another ripple effect of this initial cause, which is this health scare. In the same time, the economy is also collapsing. And so this upcoming week, what are you anticipating from the Federal Reserve? They're cutting to zero, and because Trump wants, he doesn't want the competition beating us, as if it's a race to be below zero.
To the bottom.
Then what? Exactly. A race to the bottom.
All right. I have a theory on this. This is just my theory. I have no inside information. This is the perfect time, and somebody with more knowledge than me, please jump in. If you wanted to eliminate the Federal Reserve, just like with JFK, if the Federal Reserve does not drop the interest rate, could Trump launch a 20-year Treasury bond out of the Treasury Department and issue a currency, like an emergency currency, out of the Treasury? Is that possible, or is that not possible?
From a legal standpoint, I would have no idea. I mean, I understand the logistics, the plumbing of how the broker dealers are the market makers and the Fed, but I don't know from a legal standpoint at all.
I can tell you what happened from a non-legal standpoint.
Yeah.
They offered 1.5 trillion in repo for periods of 1 month to 3 months on Thursday and Friday, but the banks only drew 120 billion out of that, which tells you that that was not the kind of liquidity that they needed, because the banks are flooded with treasuries. That's not the issue. What's going to happen is the Fed's going to go back to QE, and I think they announced that on Friday. They offered they're 33 billion in treasuries. The Fed's going to have to start buying the treasuries.
Yeah, they already are, Steph. They said in that announcement, I think it posted to their website on Thursday, that they're changing the 60 billion of T-bills to the entire curve.
Yeah, so interest rates ain't going to do anything. Basically, it's not the problem.
So what does this mean for your average investor out there that's buying and holding and being told still to buy the dip and invest in normal fashion prior to this crisis that we're in now? Like, is it going to fare well for those that are not proactively betting against the system crumbling on them?
No.
I would say all we got are dropping knives. Don't grab any of them.
Good point.
That's it. I mean, what is your quote unquote safe haven other than heading down, grabbing some silver, grabbing some cryptos, grabbing some cash, grabbing some toilet paper, grabbing some tuna.
Ammo.
It's ammo.
It's
That's disappearing too.
Oh, I know. Oh,
You gotta show them the BB gun too.
no, it's not a BB gun.
I know. I just mess with you.
It's a 380 that I actually got my. I actually got this for my wife, and she specifically said, "I want one with the laser." And I'm like, "Okay, Rambo."
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. So this upcoming week, give me some projections on what should we expect on Monday from the markets? Will it be instantly in the red, or what are some things you guys think are coming this upcoming week? Every week's gonna be a dramatic episode, but what's coming this week?
Hey, Michael, can I throw one thing in before
Alan,
we
you're
get
always
into
welcome
that?
to throw something in. Go ahead.
The one thing that, I mean, everything we're talking about is right there. There's one thing I just saw today that I hadn't been thinking about, and that is the level of corporate debt
Yeah.
in the U.S.
Yeah.
Now, according to this one report, it has jumped to $75 trillion.
That's it. That's nothing. Go ahead.
I know, not for big players like you all.
5 trillion among friends.
The other problem is that this debt is held in by industries such as energy, travel, and what's coming up is that. Oh, there you go. Look at that. That's it. What's coming up is that if these companies, and there's some companies that are hanging on barely, if these companies start to show or actually default on their bonds, well, if they look like it's possible they will, their stock prices are going to tank.
Yeah,
if they actually do default, then it right there, that's it. Who holds the debt? When you start looking at who holds the debt, and if they can't collect, get their principal, can't get their interest, this is a massive potential.
It's pension funds.
Another massive potential economic financial problem.
Yeah, it's pension funds, Alan. They're the ones holding the bag on the majority of that. Or so what that means, they're taxpayers, everyday people that have a state pension fund. They got real problems. And I'd also point out that if the bond market blows up, to your point, which it most likely will, then that sends interest rates in the bond market through the roof. So then any other company that is out there that's bleeding money, like a Tesla or an Uber. So that's why I mentioned Uber before. They've got no more liquidity. So if you're burning through $4 billion a quarter, just humming right along like an Uber, and then you need to go and access capital, you're either going to sell equity. How are you going to do that when the market's falling, that falling knife like we were referring to? Or how are you going to go into the junk bond market and borrow at 12 or 15% interest rates? Yeah. So it's got a huge domino effect that I don't think most people are really understanding at all.
So who's taking that load on? Uncle Sam or the Federal Reserve directly? Who's going to take that on? Who's going to take that out there? But who's going to alleviate their problems for them?
For the pension funds?
Yeah. Is Uncle Sam going to come in?
We are going to have the Federal Reserve, the plunge protection team. They might even ask European banks if they could buy a couple.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to end with the Federal Reserve or the global banks or the U.S. government. They're going to buy everything. I mean, they're going to buy used cars at OK Joe's used car lot over here on Broadway, just so OK Joe's doesn't go out of business. They're gonna send out helicopter money. They're just gonna buy everything because there's no other option.
Yeah.
If you let one area of this actually drop, it all drops because every single derivative is linked with every other derivative. There's so much overlap that you pull out one string and this whole thing unravels. And that's why basically the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, they're going to start shooting money into checking accounts. That's what Trump's like, hey,
money.
Right. Trump's like, hey, let's not have any income tax for the rest of the year. Well, number one, I love that idea. I also think it's part of a larger plan to get rid of the Fed. And it's just, this is going to be an interesting year. I just don't know how it all works out where.
Now watch this.
I think
Will the Federal Reserve get their
a lot of bailouts, because you look at all the industries that are vital to the U.S. economy, and if they decide to bail them out because they're so systemically important, how is the average Joe in the street going to respond to that after we went through that exact same thing in 2008? If we had Occupy Wall Street back then, just think what we'll have now. So the amount of social unrest that would be a result, in my opinion, that would result from these corporate bailouts would require an average Joe or a public bailout as well. So I think Ben is spot on there, that if or when we start to see these corporate bailouts, I think you're going to see bailouts for, I mean, the restaurant down the street. I mean, it's going to be crazy. So then as we all know here on this call, there's no free lunch.
Well,
And we're not the MMT crowd that feels as though you can just print money with no consequence whatsoever. So then what's your release valve? Is your release valve the dollar at some point in time? I don't know how it won't be. And then also the Fed's going to have to peg interest rates. They're going to have to peg the yield curve, because a lot of that debt that we're talking about with the federal government taking that on, that's short-term maturities. So they've got like last year as an example, they rolled over 11 trillion in debt. So most people say, how could that be possible? There's only 23 trillion. That's how short-term their debt is. So if they lose the short end of the yield curve, like they're doing now in the repo market, and that those short-term rates go up, that could affect the amount that the government can borrow, and or how much they have to borrow continually, because their interest rate payments go up. So they're going to have to peg the yield curve to a certain extent. Also, if they're doing that MMT, that raises the interest rate on the 10-year. That could completely disrupt the economy, almost as much as the coronavirus. If you can imagine the 10-year going up to, call it 8 or 9%, that would be like a coronavirus type shock to the economy. So the only thing I see playing out is just massive amounts of money printing.
Now, will the Federal Reserve find their 2% like they be looking like they can't seem to find? Will they?
No. We're in. This is how bad this is, and I'm not trying to freak people out. Right? We have a supply chain that's frozen or getting ready to freeze up. Now, that is going to shut down companies. Yeah. At the same time, we have a federal government and a Fed that is printing money and shoving it in. How do you print enough money to inject into a economy that is losing corporations and local mom and pops at a rate so quickly? Because when a supply chain freezes up, it isn't gradual. It is boom, you're done. That's it. And when that ends, those employees are going to lose their job. And those employees they're going to have to do this so quickly and so instant, where Trump's going to have to come out and go, okay, not only is no one paying taxes, we're going to print money, and if you're unemployed, we're going to give you $1,500 a month. We don't care if you're a legal alien, illegal alien, because we're trying to squash social unrest. Because with social unrest, you don't care if they're documented or undocumented. That's another person out there unresting, right?
But also, I'm sorry, Ben. Yeah, go ahead.
This is the perfect point of, if you ever wanted to see what hell on earth may look like, this has the potential to do it, because everything's collapsing at once, and money cannot put things on shelf.
Currency.
Yeah, I think the main way to say that from an economic standpoint is you're looking at a weird situation I've never seen in American history, at least, where you've got a demand shock at the same time you have a supply shock. So
Yep.
how does even MMT or helicopter money, how does it, let's say you get an extra $1,000 a week, but there's nothing on the shelves in Walmart. How does that fix anything? So and maybe you guys have studied history probably better than I have. Maybe throughout the American economy, if we've ever had a situation where we've had a demand shock and a supply shock at the same time. I can't find one, but that's exactly what you're talking about, Ben.
No, and that's why silver, gold, and cryptos are going to skyrocket. And I'll tell you why. Because we'll have waves of inflationary, and I'm not talking price. Think of inflation as what people run to. Right? Initially, people ran to toilet paper. Initially, they ran to water. Well, that will resolve itself with eventually people not having water, not having toilet paper, but that will balance out. Well, that next wave of what to run to with all of this money is going to grow wider. Like more and more people will go out and go, all right, well, there's big screen TVs left. I'll get those. There'll be a run on big screen TVs. Then there'll be a run on, this is what happened in Venezuela. It happens every time. It's the wealth flow. It's initially you're buying water, then you're buying food. Well, then that plateaus and you only get a certain ration of food. Then you get large screen TV. Eventually, and quickly, your local economy of production resolves itself, where the local community realizes these are the commodities that we have in our ecosystem. And that levels out, prices happen and all that. But with gold, silver, and cryptos, they will hit that wave. And once the waves hit gold, silver, and cryptos on a local level, that's when we see the prices. And that's why I say that cryptos will absorb most of it, because it's all a global market, and it's trackable on blockchain.
Yeah. One anecdote I want to add for everyone. I just got off the phone with my sister this morning. She's in Dallas, and a good friend of hers is her husband works at the local plant there. I'm not sure if it's GM or Ford, but it's where they make a lot of the trucks and the SUVs. And I don't know that she was supposed to tell my sister this, but she said that she's very, very worried because they're very close to running out of parts for some of the trucks. And if they do, they're going to have to completely shut down productions of whatever they make there, the trucks or the SUVs.
Yeah, and where are the parts coming from?
China.
It shut down in South Korea and Japan. Supply chain.
One thing I'm seeing in connection with what we're all talking about, and it's locally, or I'm thinking about it, is in San Diego, we have a convention center. Conventions are canceling.
Oh, big time.
There are businesses near and around the convention center that get over half their annual income from the conventions.
Yeah.
Businesses, restaurants, you get the idea. Well, when your source of customers doesn't show up, you're going to wind up closing your doors.
Yeah. Service industry will get hit hard.
Yep.
Exactly. And then, with the travel bans, you're flying. No, you're not flying because we got no planes. Therefore, you're out of a job. Think about, I think it's Princess Cruise Line that shut down its big boats for a couple months.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a supplier to that company and they're not going to buy from you for 2 months, well, that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And, we can just go on and on with all these things. But what I'm thinking about it from a very local standpoint, and now they're closing schools. You're in college. Well, you're not going to be in a classroom. Fortunately, they have the technology to do the classes online. What would have happened 20, 30 years ago? They would have just closed the college. And, your education would be postponed. All the sports activities, national, professional, local, they're being canceled. And there's a financial repercussion from what this is going to cause, and that is what I think a lot about.
So
because this affects everybody at the personal level.
Yeah.
So watch this. The supply chain is going to break down this spring, therefore causing a lot of people to have a lot of problems. Therefore, it's going to be some social unrest at the same time of a health outbreak, and then there's going to come martial law. So if all those things occurred the way that it appears like they could, then come spring or come fall rather, could there be some type of people in the streets is good weather? The hell with my health. I haven't eaten in 2 or 3 days. I need to go find food. Social unrest picks up. Then the president says, due to this, whatever, on top of people, hospitals being crowded, all that stuff like that, can there be martial law from the president? Executive order comes September-ish.
I don't think we got that long.
You said
it's that as an ex-truck driver, right? I lived in accordance with the just-in-time delivery system, and it is well named. Right? Literally, it is just in time. That we had gotten so efficient at shipping, because you have to think, when you go shopping and they ring you out and they boop, boop, boop.
Yeah.
There's not a person that is, okay, we need inventory, we need some of this, no, that's all handled by a computer that processes an algorithm of how much of that product they sold last week in comparison to the year before, how much. It's literally down to NASA. We got so perfect that we're going to perfectly fuck ourselves.
Yeah.
That's what we've done. And when I say just in time, I'm going to tell you now, I have talked to friends who work at Walmart as truck drivers, work for Walgreens as truck drivers, work at CBS as truck drivers. They are the distribution centers that they receive from are done. They are toast. These distribution centers are almost empty. I'd say at the most, that's why I said earlier, and I don't think we were recording yet, This weekend, watch what happens this weekend, because this weekend's the first weekend where average Joe and Jane heading out grocery shopping walk in to a Walmart at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning right before they go to church, and there ain't no food on there.
Yeah.
Watch that reaction.
Yeah.
Now,
It's
we're actually reaching the point where, yeah, they've seen some things on Facebook, but walking in and seeing empty shelves at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning before the rush, what do you think their reaction is going to be? Oh, crap, grab what we can. Then the next wave comes in. Then they start putting up the signs. Sorry, sold out, sold out. What do you mean? It's only 10 o'clock in the morning. When do you get your next shipment? Last night. Wait, what? Yeah, our shipment, instead of a full truck, we only got a quarter of a truck. Wait, why? Because our suppliers are now running out.
Yeah.
And because the reason it's called a supply chain is there's links in it. And you have the producer that ships to a regional distribution center, that ships to a local distribution center. The suppliers are running out of the raw materials to produce the product. What they do is they allocate their production, what they've been able to make, actually based on the seniority of their clients. Like Walmart is a level 1 priority shipper. That's that. If nobody else gets it, Walmart's getting it. When Walmart is out, you're done. Local is not going to get any. And my friends, Costco and Sam's was the canary in the coal mine, because a lot of these local bodegos or whatever you call them in your local neighborhoods, that's where they get their product. They'll go in there and they'll buy 1,000 Slim Jims, and they only pay like a nickel a piece, and they sell them for 50 cents at their place. Well, as soon as I started seeing Costco and Sam's running out, which at the tippy top of the shipping priority is Sam's.
Right. Yeah, right.
Everything else.
Yeah, I think in the best case too, we're looking at carry, and if it subsides, like he was saying in April, then that's fantastic news, and that's what we should all be praying for. But there's still about I would say a month or two lag on the supplies coming in from China, even if they're back online right now. It's the United, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the suppliers in the United States were stocked up because of the Chinese New Year. So once they go through that amount of supply they had, then it takes the boat, call it 30 to 40 days maybe to get here from China. So even if they are back online right now, there's still going to be a month or two where we have that supply shock you're referring to in the States.
Well, plus China's just like America. They're going to make sure that they have everything they need before they ship out anything.
Right.
They aren't going to go, oh, thank God, we finally have parts. Let's ship them over to our friends over in America.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to happen. And all of the medical supplies, all of the IV bags. Have you heard that we have a shortage on IV bags? Because there was one company that basically made all of the IV bags. Well, they've been shut down. So now we have a run on IV bags. This is not going to be pretty, and it is going to be ugly as we've ever. This is going to make the Great Friggin' Depression look like a joke, because at least in the Great Depression, we were maybe one generation away from remembering how to grow our own food. I don't know how to plant food. I don't know how to farm. I don't live anywhere near really any farms.
There's a YouTube that'll show you how to do it. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
Plant a crop in YouTube.
Some
Hey,
seed-
just a gentle reminder for the audience.
Yeah.
You know, we're humans, you know, and we're going to react a certain way.
Mhm.
But we also have a very short memory. And just want to remind everyone, when there weren't bioweapon labs and there weren't jets and there weren't trucking, we weren't blessed, you know, depending on how you look at it, at the modern age of what we have access and the internet, that we can have this meeting, you know, and not come in contact. It's great. But Athens plague, 430 to 426 BC. The plague in Italy, 169 AD. The Justinian plague, 541 to 42. The Black Death, 1347 to 51. The Italian plague again, 1629, 1631. The Great Plague in the United Kingdom, 1665 to 66. The French bubonic plague, 1720. The plague in Moscow, 1771. The third pandemic in China, 1855 to the 1950s, which, by the way, brought us the 1918 pandemic.
Those are all irrelevant.
But the point being, it's not about relevance. It's about this has happened before, and it's cyclical. So the only choice we have, we have to try and break the cycles so we flatten that curve. Like Kerry was saying with Dr. Fauci, we want to flatten that curve because there's so many infections that have already occurred because it's been traveling for weeks and people weren't tested. You know, we got to flatten that curve. So be aware, do the best you can.
Yeah, it's. I agree with what you're talking about. Like we will survive this. It's just what I'm saying is that we've never, ever, ever in human history have actually been so reliant on a global supply chain.
Supply chain.
Right. All of those plagues were localized, and all of their economies were localized. We were 99 to 100% agriculture. It's we're living in a completely different world that those might have well actually been on completely different planets.
Yeah.
Exactly my
Well,
point.
This gentleman is saying that the grocery stores in Plainfield, Illinois, have posted new operating times so they can restock.
Welcome to 1977 oil.
Yeah.
Except this time it's real.
Thanks, Jay.
Well, what this points out to me, you know, before I have to go, is that hopefully the lesson is fully learned now. And yes, we are going to unfortunately learn it in some way or fashion the hard way. Hopefully it's not that hard. And that is, what is America doing being dependent on any country in the world for what it needs to be self-sustainable? Now, if we absolutely needed something, okay, I get it. One thing, two things, but not the vast majority of our medical supplies or anything, because what made America capable of doing what it did in WW2 and fighting a world war on two fronts, not only surviving but being victorious, it was self-sufficient. We need to return to the days when America is self-sufficient so we can take care of ourselves and be in the position to help others in the world. You can't help somebody else if you're drowning.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Any last thoughts here? We've been hour 14. If you guys want to get, because Alan has to go. If you guys have any last thoughts you want to leave us with, feel free to do so.
I'd say that everyone just relax and hold on.
Pray.
All right.
Pray, absolutely.
Put the Lord in it. The Lord knew this was coming well before we did, so I'm not too concerned myself, actually. But Mr. Kerry Lutz, any last thoughts? George Gammon, Trader Steph, anybody want to leave us some last thoughts?
Buckle up. We'll get through it. We're gonna get through this.
All right, guys. I gotta run.
All right, Kerry. See you later, my friend. Thanks
Hey,
for coming in.
Kerry, did you get that email I sent you?
You sent me an email.
Yeah, you
Get it.
you emailed me about the hotel. I sent you the info back. I just want to make sure you got.
Yeah. I got that, but
Okay.
I gonna come, but then then my son, he came a week earlier,
Okay.
and